What does it mean for something to be cool? One explanation is for something or someone to be an underdog, to be something that isn't really too popular, sort of like an unknown gem that's waiting to be discovered. That's certainly the definition that hipsters would give to something being cool, whether it's a band or a hole-in-the-wall bar. Once it starts becoming mainstream, once it becomes too popular, all of a sudden it's considered uncool. And I've got to admit, I've experienced the same kind of uncooling effect happen with things that I like in life. Certainly some websites and image boards come to mind. Reddit is probably a good example of one that you all could probably relate to. There were a lot of subreddits that I used to really like. A lot of them are now defunct. They no longer exist. But they used to be really cool, right? And Reddit in general used to be really cool. But once it started becoming more mainstream, once it truly did become the front page of the internet, it started to suck. Now, you're probably wondering, how could this possibly apply to Christianity? I mean, after all, Christianity is the dominant religion of the planet. Now, it is true that Christianity, it has a whole lot of members, which is pretty easy when you consider the fact that for most Christians to, well, consider someone Christian, all they really have to do is profess their love and faith in Jesus Christ, and then boom, you get into the club. But I'm talking more about the amount of influence and control that Christianity has had over the years. You know, certainly in America, it seems like that's really been waning. Take gay marriage, for example, or the broader LGBT movement. One of the primary oppositions to this movement was traditionally evangelical Christians. And so politicians, they would publicly adopt these Christian values and, obviously they would vote against gay marriage or any other type of advancement that LGBT was trying to make. So that they could appease that voter base, right? Because the evangelical voter base, it used to really matter. But of course, gay marriage, it went away from being a states' rights issue to then being federally legalized in 2015. And there has been some challenges to it since then, but for the most part, they're really minor, right? Like that evangelical voter base, it's shrunk down a whole lot, or maybe they're not as opposed to gay marriage as they used to be, and so as a consequence, the politicians aren't either. And if we go back further, we see these same groups of fundamentalist Christians being behind the opposition to video games and heavy metal and rock music, but I think this influence that the fundamentalist Christianity has had in America was at its peak when George Bush said that God himself advised him to invade Iraq and Afghanistan. And the majority of the American public, they went with it. They were in a rage over the 9/11 attacks, and whether the creator of the universe really did talk into Bush's ear and advised him to go with this invasion or not, Americans were down for it. Now, I personally don't really think that God actually did tell Bush to invade Iraq. If anything, it was probably Dick Cheney making those suggestions, but I can see how someone could confuse the two. But it doesn't really get more influential than that, right? The President of the United States invoking the Christian God as justification for invading some countries that didn't even really have anything to do with 9/11. And after that climax, things seemed to die down over the next 2 decades. I've already mentioned how gay marriage became legalized, the religious propaganda against drugs, video games, and music was abandoned for some more secular reasoning, like trying to say that these things are just bad for society. And fewer people, they identify as Christian or any of its other sub-denominations. More people these days are identifying as either atheist or just not interested in religion, right? Not affiliated with any particular group. So it's definitely not as popular as it once was, but there seems to be some attempts that people are making to bring it back. And there's really 2 radically different approaches that I'm seeing. One of them is progressive Christianity. So instead of being opposed to things like gay marriage, feminism, atheism, and drug use, a lot of Christians are just embracing it, right? They're pretty much aligning themselves with the political progressives. It's the classic, if you can't beat them, join them. But then there's another group that seem to really want to revive the old Christianity, and in some ways they're kind of taking more of an Old Testament approach to it by insisting that, God is real, he has rules, and he's very serious about you following those rules. And to the mainstream audience, this is seen as an attitude of just being anti-gay, anti-trans, anti-porn, and, pro-life positions. And of course, all of these positions will get labeled as fascism because, of course, that's just one of the go-to moves. When you don't like something, you call it fascism. But I think that this is really the underdog of Christianity. It's certainly the less mainstream approach, and it's also the more rebellious approach because, during this pandemic, churches were deemed non-essential, and in most places in the US, you're not allowed to attend church, at least not in person, because, well, it goes against social distancing. And from what I've seen, it seems to be more of the conservative churches that are rejecting these government orders and attempting to gather anyway. So the rebelliousness, obviously that makes it a little bit cooler. Everybody likes a rebel. And there's also some Christian media that I've noticed has gained a lot more popularity on the internet, which normally is not the domain of religion or religious people. Like, the internet is one of the things that really helped the atheist community gain a lot of traction, especially in the early days. But if you take a look at Jordan Peterson's playlist about the Bible as an example, almost every one of those videos is pretty popular. Just about every one of them has more than 1 million views, and they've got way more likes than dislikes. And they were also mostly done in a public theater. Like, people actually paid tickets to listen to this guy give hours-long lectures about the Bible. And a lot of the people attending were also college age. Of course, you've got Kanye West making a Christian album, Jesus is King. So obviously, this Christianity, or at least this new Christianity, is very popular amongst younger people. This album was also #1 on the Billboard 200. So I think we're starting to look at a bit of a comeback. Now, it's going to be interesting to see how this actually plays out over the next few years and decades. Like I said, religion has lost a lot of its influence on people's lives, but I kind of get the sense that most people have just replaced religion with politics. And there's really not much difference from where I'm standing. Instead of people constructing their worldview on the foundation of the Bible or Christianity, or what the pastor said, now people are just basing it on what the news said, or some article that they read. And a lot of the time people aren't even reading articles. I mean, let's be honest, people just read headlines or titles of videos and then judge everything based off of that. And yeah, again, like, it's not really that much different to me. I mean, people, from my perspective, are treating politics like a religion anyway. I'm sure that some people will say that it's better because they're basing their views on something in the world instead of, like, I guess, mysticism or God, something that you can't really see. But if the end result is still polluted, it really doesn't matter to me how much more purer the ingredients are.